Officer meeting for February 4th, 2021, for San Mateo County. My name is Lisa Grote, and I am the zoning hearing officer for the county. And we do start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I'm going to ask Deb Robinson to lead us in the pledge. Thanks.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Deb. And this morning, we do have 3 items on the agenda, but before we get into those items, there is an opportunity for oral communication. So if there's anyone on this Zoom meeting who would like to speak to an item that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to raise your hand, and Deb or Janeth can tell all of the participants how to do that. Okay, I don't see anyone that is indicating that they would like to speak on an item not on the agenda. So if I have overlooked someone, do just let me know, but we will, in the meantime, get into the regular agenda items. And this is a continued item. It's the first item on the agenda. The owner it has been continued from the December 17th, 2020 meeting. The owner is 6021 Wei Ying LC. The applicant is Ryan Lay. The file number is PLN 2020-00097. The location is 20 Dexter Avenue in North Fair Oaks, and the APN assessor's parcel number is 060-273-140. And Kanoa Kelly has been the project planner. Kanoa, if you'd like to start with a brief staff report and kind of bring us up to date on what's occurred since December 17th.
Sure. I can. Did you want me to go over the project one more time in case there's anybody new?
Yes,
okay.
Please. Yeah, just as a summary. Thanks.
Let me open up my presentation. Okay, so the project itself is a consideration of a minor subdivision for property at 20 Dexter Avenue. They're subdividing a 11,780 square foot parcel into 4 townhouse units and 1 common interest parcel. There's also the removal of a 30-inch diameter redwood tree here at 20 Dexter Avenue. And it's zoned R3S5 in the North Fair Oaks area, adjacent to the NMU ECR zones. Here you can see it kind of adjacent to an alleyway there, just kind of acting as a transitional area from commercial to residential. And here you can see the redwood trees on the property. And these are the lots, the condo subdivision lots that will be subdivided on this property. So as a visual there. These are the elevations that show the proposed colorways for the building. A majority of the is going to be a kind of a light gray stucco. And with the storm cloud or dark gray accents on the hardywood siding, and then some other dark brown and white accents on the property. So overall, a very neutral color palette. And this is just to show where the trees are being removed. There is also a kind of an after the fact tree removal. A tree was removed in 2019, and that is part of the application. So there's a tree here, and then they are requesting tree number 28 here to be removed as part of the application. So the project, it meets all of the R3S5 development standards, county subdivision regulations, and is categorically exempt under CEQA. So since the last CHO hearing, we did have a community meeting. It was held on January 12th, 2021 to solicit feedback on the project. So we did receive quite a few people at that meeting. I guess the overall sentiment from the public was that the project was 1 story too tall, and they didn't like the design. There are also some concerns about the protection of the trees and impact the development would have to the trees. We also went over those issues at the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting on January 28th. And then at that meeting, the North Fair Oaks Community Council voted to approve or to recommend approval of the project at that meeting. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the minor subdivision, county file number PON 2020-00097, based on the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval listed in attachment A of the staff report. And that was a quick overview of the project, and I'll open up to any questions.
Okay, thanks, Kanoa. I would like to ask, I know that we have received a letter, and we will note that under public comment, and I'd like to discuss the items that were raised in the letter. We received that yesterday afternoon, but before we get into the public comment and some of the concerns that have been raised, I would like to ask the applicant if they have anything that they would like to add to what Kanoa has just indicated.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, I can hear you. Ryan Lay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Kanoa, for the presentation. Thanks everyone for coming. Yeah, I just want to once again reiterate, we are conforming to the zoning. We are applying, straight zoning, not really asking for anything outside of the zoning. I know there were some issues with the general aesthetic, but we actually, perceive it as a nice little transition between, El Camino and the neighborhood. And in regards to the protection of the trees and whatnot, that was actually a problem raised in every meeting. But we did have the arborist there, and I believe he's also here today. And he was able to provide responses to practically every concern that the neighbors had. At some of the meetings, it's hard for some of the neighbors to actually accept his response. But yeah, the arborist was there at both the meetings, and he was able to provide responses to their concerns. So yeah. Okay,
great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to ask either Deb or Janeth to just read what the instructions are for people who would like to comment on this item.
Okay, for those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments during the general public comment period. And for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to raise your hand to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand at the beginning of a meeting for an agenda item that is later in the meeting. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your account and inform you that you may begin speaking. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thanks, Deb. And for those of you who may have just joined us, we are on item 1 of our agenda today. So are there members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Again, we're on item number 1. Okay. Now, I am not seeing anyone raising their hand to speak on this item. Deb or Janeth, can you confirm that I'm reading that correctly?
That's correct. There are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I do have a couple of questions. And first, I want to note that there was a letter submitted yesterday, February 3rd, 2021. And it is it says the residents of Selby Park neighborhood, and they do raise a number of concerns. They've got them enumerated, and I'm just going to go over them briefly. One is the developers team communicated that 13 heritage redwood trees would have their roots severed to excavate for the driveway. And again, that's the first question or comment, and I would like to ask the arborist about that because I do see that he's here. And then second, the developers team communicated that in less than 20 years, the redwood trees on the east property line would begin to damage the driveway. And then thirdly, that the trees do need water on an ongoing basis. Then there's a question, this may be for the arborist as well as our project planner, Kanoa. It says here, the planning department states that no habitat or wildlife will be harmed by this development. And they go into some concerns that they have about raptors and ravens. And then the concerns of the community have been disrespected or not taken seriously. And a couple of paragraphs about how their concerns were addressed. So if we could start with number one, and if I could ask the developer or his arborist, how you've addressed those 13 heritage redwood trees and any severed roots that might be needed for the driveway.
Yeah, I could actually speak before Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I think there was a little bit of misinformation in the first meeting. I was informed by, our civil engineer that we were just following the recommendations from the geotech report and the arbor's report. I believe they informed us we're only cutting the soil down 6 inches. I don't believe we will be like severing or like cutting any roots, but I'm sure Kevin could provide a little more clarity on that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Mr. Kilty, I think it is. You may be muted. I am not hearing Mr. Kilty.
Okay, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank
I
you.
have to get my wife to help me unmute. So
Oh, okay. All right.
I do have the list of questions that you had. And first question was about roots being severed.
Yes.
The excavation depth for the driveway is only going to be 6 inches.
Okay.
So at 6 inches, I don't expect to see any roots that are going to be severed. There may be something that's above surface, and that can either be, we'll analyze that as we do the hand excavation for that. One way we handle that is we actually shave the top sometimes, and then sometimes if we have to, we do sever. But I see root loss is going to be quite minor. Less than 5% for the driveway. And the driveway area before it's installed will be protected with root barrier, chips, things like that to keep compaction down to help prior to the driveway going in. So I don't see that being much of an issue. The driveway is going to be above grade and it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Okay. So in your then professional opinion, even if some of the roots might be severed, you don't expect them to be, but if they were to be, and it was such a small percentage, that wouldn't necessarily damage the tree. Would that be a fair statement?
That wouldn't. We'd mitigate it with water or fertilizer, things like that.
Okay.
As we get into the what roots we find. I don't see a problem at all.
Okay.
It's a great plan by raising the grade. It keeps us from excavating because, some of these driveways are so over-engineered that you have to go down 16, 18 inches, then we'd have a problem. But the fact we're raising the grade really helps us quite a bit on this.
Okay.
So I really don't see a problem. Future damage to the driveway.
Right.
If we have damage to the driveway, it'll be quite a few years down the line, which would be normal. We have redwood trees there. Damage to the driveway means the redwoods are doing well. So that's, it is something that the homeowner group in the subdivision will have to address at some point, maybe a replacement of a driveway. But as you know, all driveways end up being replaced. They seem to, if we're going to do something that's pro tree, it's not going to be bomb proof, to where there's going to be roots under the driveway, and redwood trees are known to expand. So there will be some damage down the road. It'll be in the future, quite a few years. So
Okay.
the redevelopment will be quite established prior to any damage happening. And it's something that the future homeowners can be warned of,
Right, right. And that would not be any different than what a current homeowner or owner of the building that is there now would experience. I mean, there would be expected some damage to paved areas that are on the site now.
Yeah.
So this is, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
So this
And
is not
if you look
increasing.
at the existing driveways, that they're broke down and they're swelled up, and you see it everywhere we go, and that's common. If you're going to have big trees and houses, you're going to have some root damage.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you. Then how about the third concern about the trees needing, excuse me, the trees needing water and over an extended period of time, not just during construction?
Right. And that's easily addressed. At the time of excavation, there's a couple ways we can do it. One, we can use just a drip system below the subgrade, below the geogrid and the base rock. It'd be a drip system, so it wouldn't apply water rapidly enough to hurt the subgrade of the driveway. And it would be a simple matter of putting emitters on about a 10-foot center and below that, and it'd be hooked to a regular irrigation system. The other system we've used, and we've done quite well with this, is we've used 3-inch drain pipe, and we've made it like a drain field below the substructure of the driveway. And the drain field would daylight at the base of the redwoods, where we could add fertilizer or water as needed into that system. It also allows air into the roots, which is one of the concerns below the driveway. It's a very inexpensive method. Again, about 10-foot centers for these drain pipes. They'd be surrounded with drain rock and slightly below the grade of the bottom of the base rock. We did a large project in Palo Alto. It was a private residence, but where we used this method, and the city actually asked us to write an article about it for the Western Arborist magazine, because the process was so successful, and it's exactly the same recipe we're going to use here. That process was for oak trees. This one's for redwoods. Redwoods are actually a little easier than oaks as far as root damage, because they like water, and water is usually the mitigating measure. So one of those two irrigation methods could be applied to this, and we've been quite successful using that method.
Okay, thank you. And this is a quick question for the applicant before the owner, before we go on to the next couple questions that we're going to deal with. But are you amenable to including what Mr. Kilty just mentioned in your irrigation plans?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, great, thank you. Okay, and then the next question, thank you very much, by the way, Mr. Kilty, for explaining that.
No problem.
The next question is about habitat or wildlife, raptors and ravens. Perhaps Mr. Kilty or Kanoa would like to comment on this. If the trees are not going to be damaged, then the raptors and the ravens would not be affected. Am I misunderstanding that, or is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay.
There would be some, there's going to be, with all the construction going on, there's going to be some kind of a disturbance.
Mhm.
But what I've noticed on construction sites, that it's not a big deal as far as that the birds adapt quite well to the construction. And then post-construction, it'll be life as normal, you know. If the trees aren't damaged then or removed, then the birds and any wildlife would just, you know, react as normal as they would in a normal residence.
Okay, okay, thank you. Kanoa, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, so that's one of the reasons they're not. They're only removing one tree. So I doubt that the you know, any bird activity in the existing canopy would be, you know, disturbed.
Okay.
So
Okay, okay, all right, thanks. And then this last concern, I don't know that we'll be able to address it specifically today, but I gather from the letter, and they have written this to the Board of Supervisors, that some of the neighbors feel that their concerns weren't taken seriously, or that there was a lack of detail. And I'm sorry they feel that way, but my understanding is that you did have the meeting, and thank you, Kanoa, for setting that up on January 12th, was it, I think?
yeah.
Okay, how many people do you think attended that meeting?
Probably you know, like 12 people
Okay,
around there.
all
Yeah.
right. All right, and the applicant and Mr. Kilty were there to address
Yes.
these concerns. Okay, great. And at the North Fair Oaks Community Council, again, I think that was just last Friday or Thursday
Mhm.
night. Okay, and people attended that meeting as well. Neighbors of this particular project attended that meeting.
Yeah, yes, there were community members that spoke at that
Okay.
hearing. Mhm.
Okay, and the same kinds of concerns brought up.
Yes, the same concerns were brought up at that meeting.
Okay, and again, the community council voted to approve it. I realize it was a 3-2 vote, but they did vote to approve it. Or
Yes,
recommend approval. Yeah.
yes, it was 3-2, and then one council member abstained from voting.
Okay. Okay. Um, and again, I think the county did do everything it could to reach out to the neighbors and address their concerns. And I'm sorry that they feel that they haven't been addressed, but I do think many attempts were made to do that. In response to some of these concerns, and also to the conditions that you've recommended, Kanoa, in your staff report, and this is really more, I think, a question for the applicant, but I would feel comfortable if we added some conditions specifically about the mitigation measures for the trees, and referencing the very thorough arborist report that was submitted with the application materials. So my recommendation, my suggestion here would be that we add a condition 13 that would say mitigation measures outlined in the arborist report dated 11/18/2019 shall be implemented. That replacement trees would be required for the one tree that was removed, and the one tree that was removed in 2019, and the one tree that's being proposed for removal as part of this application, that there be replacement trees of a minimum of 15 gallon, and that any trees that are damaged, in the professional opinion of the arborist, that any trees that are damaged to the point that they would die shall be replaced. And this would be during construction. So if any trees are damaged such that their health is at risk, that they would also be replaced on a 1-to-1 basis with 15 gallon minimums. Now, do those conditions sound amenable to the applicant?
Yeah, that is fine.
Okay, okay.
And Lisa, I just wanted to also mention that I reached out to our county arborist to discuss additional trees on site, and because of all of the the redwoods, and I think they have a total of 28 or 30 trees on site, and he's okay with adding smaller trees that are appropriate an appropriate size on that. So they're so certain like redwoods and oak trees and wouldn't be appropriate, but there are other options that they could put on site to replace those.
Okay. Okay. So I think how we would read word the condition is that trees, those trees would be replaced to be of a type determined by the arborist with consultation from the county arborist.
Mhm.
If that sounds amenable to everybody. Okay, okay. And so it gives some flexibility there. They don't have to be redwoods or oaks. Okay. And then just lastly, Kanoa, this does, I know you say in the staff report that this meets all of the height requirements, setback requirements, all of the zoning aspects and the community plan, North Fair Oaks community plan policies. Can you confirm that?
Yes, that we've compared the project against all of those documents, and it meets all of the requirements, complies with all of those documents. The one thing that it doesn't comply with is the North Fair Oaks community plan density requirements. It's kind of in conflict with the zoning, and the zoning is kind of what prevails here. So they're within the density for the zoning. The North Fair Oaks community plan actually has increased zoning, which would mandate like more units, 6 units, and but the site, the way it's situated, and with all of the trees, it wouldn't really allow that. But it is in compliance with all of the other policies.
Okay, great. So in other words, if they went strictly by the North Fair Oaks community plan, they could actually get 2 more units on that site if they were to go up to the 6 that are allowed.
Right.
Okay, okay. So they're proposing 4, which is less than what the community plan would ordinarily call for in that location.
Correct.
Okay, okay. And that is because of site constraints and trying to accommodate trees and other features on the site.
Right.
Okay, okay, thanks. Well then, I'm going to ask one more time if there is anyone who would like to speak to this item. And I'm checking my screen. And I don't see anyone with their hand raised. And Janeth, can you confirm that I'm reading that correctly?
That's correct. No hands are raised.
Okay, great. And I noticed there is one call-in listener, so I'm hoping that he or she knows how that he or she could participate if wanted.
Correct. They would just do a *9 to raise their hand.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, well, seeing no other comment, I will ask the applicant just one last time for confirmation that you've had a chance to read through all the conditions, that you understand them and are in agreement with them, and including those couple that we talked about adding this morning.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, well, I am going to go ahead then and close the public hearing. I will issue an approval for this project in compliance or in conformance with the findings and conditions that are in the staff report, plus the additional ones we added this morning. If anyone does want to appeal this item, the appeal would need to be made in writing or via email by February 19th of 2021. That would need to be done by the close of business that day. And there is a $616.35 appeal fee should anyone want to appeal that decision.
I can always clock them, but let's go on.
Okay, I'm hearing somebody talk in the background, but I don't think it is for us. Hold on one second. Is anyone, no one has their hands raised? Okay, all right, so with that, I will close the public hearing and issue that written determination. And again, that appeal period expires as of February 19th, 2021 at close of business. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kanoa, and thank you to the applicants for going the extra mile with the community meeting and addressing the residents' comments. I appreciate it. Okay, thanks. All right, we are going to go on to item number 2. It's owner applicant 2161 Mills LLC, file number PLN 2020-00403. The location is 2161 Mills Avenue in West Menlo Park, and the assessor's parcel number is 074022-160. And Mike Schaller is the project planner. So Mike, if you'd like to start with a report.
Yes, good morning. Let me share my screen with you so you can see my my presentation, my slideshow.
Okay.
There we go, and come on, it worked earlier. There we go. All right. Yes, so the project before you today is a consideration of a minor subdivision to split an existing one parcel into two. Let me start by telling where the project is located. The applicant, 2161 Mills LLC, represented by Aaron Fukuhara, if I'm saying that correctly, is proposing to subdivide the property located at 2161 Mills Avenue in West Menlo Park, or in the West Menlo Park neighborhood. The project parcel is located at the southwest end of Mills Avenue, you can see right here. Approximately 450 feet from the intersection with Alameda de las Pulgas. The project site is developed with an existing single-family dwelling, detached garage, and detached accessory building, house, garage, building. There are two significant sized trees located on the parcel, one up here at the front corner, which will remain, and then one tree in the back corner here, which the applicant is proposing to remove. All existing buildings will be demolished prior to recordation of the parcel map. The site is nearly flat and is surrounded by existing single-family homes, generally, in most cases, at the allowed zoning minimum parcel size for this zoning district. As stated previously, the applicant is proposing to subdivide the existing 10,052 square foot parcel to create two residential parcels of 5,026 square feet each. Both proposed parcels will take access directly from Mills Avenue. Public utilities will be provided by underground lines. Water will be supplied by the California Water Service via an existing water line serving the project site. The West Bay Sanitary District will provide sewer service to the site. As I mentioned previously, one tree, a 19.5-inch Siberian elm located here in the back, is proposed for removal. The arborist report submitted for this project indicates that the tree has poor to fair vigor and suffers from an elm leaf beetle infestation. Both parcels, as you can see in the on the tentative site plan, or I'm sorry, tentative parcel map, both parcels are of sufficient size and shape to accommodate future residential construction that complies with the zoning regulations for this neighborhood. Now, as discussed in the staff report, the project conforms to the general plan's land use designation for the site, which is medium density residential. It also complies with the minimum parcel size requirements of the S72 district, which is 5,000 square feet. Also, as discussed in the staff report, all of the required findings for subdivision that are relevant to this site can be made. In closing, staff is recommending approval of this project subject to the required findings and conditions of approval identified in attachment A of your report. Are there any questions I can answer for you at this time?
I don't have any questions at this point, but I would like to give the applicant an opportunity to make any additional comments. Thanks, Mike, for your presentation. Is your applicant with us today at the meeting?
I do not see him. I believe the Woods are here for Brian's project, I believe.
I do see a hand raised on the attendee side. Last name
Yes.
Kuhara, is that?
Oh, okay, yes. If
Yes.
I don't see him.
Okay, he's on the other side. So let me go ahead and promote him. And that way he can speak on the item. There you go.
There he is. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Fukuhara, would you like to make any additional comments? I think he's still muted.
Here we go.
Okay.
Is that my now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't have any additional comments. I'd just like to thank Michael for working with us on the project summary. And I'm happy to address any issues or questions as they arise. I believe Dan McLeod, as well as our architect, John Ray, are also on the line should we need them to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Are there any comments from the public? I will open the public hearing if there are any comments from the public.
I have not received any, just for the record.
Okay. And I am not seeing any comments. Oh, I do see a Mike DiMartino who would like to comment. Is there a way to unmute him, Janeth?
Yes, I'll go ahead and do that now.
Thank you very much.
Mr. DiMartino, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yes, great. Would you like to make any comments or ask questions if you have questions?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question about the protocol for the public to discuss with the county zoning and planning groups how to potentially modify some of the setback and building height requirements that are currently within the code. And I'm using this particular situation as an opportunity to discuss that because my observation on Mills and quite a few other bits of construction in this University Heights area is that maybe some of the original intent of the height dimensions relative to setbacks need to be reevaluated, and that we are seeing a number of construction groups putting together designs that may be a little bit higher and pushing the envelope even of the legality as described in the codes that they are using. The result being that the three-dimensional volumetric density of a particular group of parcels in a row is starting to become a little bit intimidating in my view. So my question is specifically, given that Mills is a primary contributor to this rapid increase in height, house to house, parcel to parcel, how does the public make an effort to communicate to planning and zoning our concerns?
Okay, great. Thank you. And I can start an answer to that. And Mike, you may want to add to this. For your comments are certainly noted here. For this particular application, We need to evaluate it, Mike first at a staff level, and then me as the zoning admin or hearing officer, given the current requirements. And so if it is, and this is just for the subdivision, as a matter of fact, it isn't actually for the house or houses.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Right, for the houses themselves. So what we're really looking at here is lot depth and width, and the fact that there is a buildable envelope on the site that meets setbacks and things like that. If you do believe that there are changes that are needed to the zoning requirements, that would be something that is brought up to ultimately the director of the Department of Planning and Building, and there would need to be a very long-term study that would be conducted on amendments to the zoning ordinance. Those usually do take quite a bit of time. They can take anywhere from a year to 18 months, and it becomes a community effort because they would want to know that the majority of the community would support something like that, some changes to the zoning ordinance. And so it becomes what's called a long range project that evaluates height, density, what's called floor area ratio, lot coverage, setbacks. It's a very extensive long-term study.
Sure, I understand. I've done remodeling and understand the codes and so forth.
Right.
Again, the general feel is that as you go up and down Mills at this point, that the creation of residence after residence for economic reasons, I'm sure, of essentially the maximum envelope with even some variable structures such as chimneys or rear decks and so forth, I think may be legal and yet not properly considered at the time that the zoning ordinances and other setback provision rules were established. I don't think that when those were written, it was expected that every developer would pursue the most aggressive building structures allowed under the law. And now we have gotten to the point where I think almost every one of those developments is close to that. And the net effect is that, again, the fairly tight subdivision parcels, such as what we're looking at right now, change the feel of a particular street. The shadow lines of the sun are quite different than I think what was envisioned originally. The sight lines into neighboring properties are different than what was intended at a universal level. Sure, if one particular house was looking into one particular property, that would be a certain scenario. But if every property is looking into every other property, you move quickly from an abstract concept of a residential area into an abstract concept of a tenement area. And so that's my concern.
Okay. Yeah. And I think those are longer term and bigger issues than what we are dealing with here. And
Sure.
I did want to just amend, and I think Mike wants to say something too, but I wanted to amend something I said about, this goes to the director of planning and building. It wouldn't go to him for approval of those kinds of changes to zoning ordinance, but it would go to him as registering a concern. And then there would be a longer term study. And then it would need to go through the planning commission and board of supervisors to actually change the zoning ordinance. So so again, it would start with a conversation with the director of the department, and then if there were neighborhood support for these kinds of changes, that would then become the longer term planning effort. So Mike, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't work in the long range planning section, but I've been here long enough to know how things get onto their work schedule. So essentially the work program of the long range planning section is reviewed and set by the planning commission on a yearly basis. What and how stuff gets onto that work's agenda can come from a couple of different ways, or more than a couple. But in the instance of a change of a zoning district for a particular neighborhood, it typically comes one of two ways. Either a group of people living within a neighborhood approach their supervisor for their district and express their concerns and request that that the planning department initiate some kind of a review of the zoning for their neighborhood. The supervisor, if he agrees, can then send that direction down the chain of command to the planning department. The other option is individuals and or groups, and it was always better if if it appears that there's a larger community backing behind some kind of an effort, such as a rezoning. They can approach the planning commission and ask that the planning commission weigh in as to whether they believe this is something that should be added to the planning department's work program. So that's typically how rezoning efforts for a particular neighborhood come about. Other changes to zoning are frequently happen because of changes at state or federal law levels, but for what you're suggesting or the changes that you would like to at least have examined, that would typically be the way that the ball would get rolling, is to approach either the board of supervisors or the supervisor for that district, or alternately the planning commission themselves.
So
Okay,
does that,
thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. That helped answer.
I was looking for an explanation of the process. I understand that the rules and so forth exist currently, and those that comply with those rules are entitled to follow those rules as they exist, and that you know, in this particular case, if we were to use it as an example, this will be built and done prior to any potential changes at all. So I appreciate all of that, but I wanted to know, since it is, I think, you know, again, if you ride up and down Mills Avenue, you will see a very different look from what it was in a decade ago. Decisions were made about street widths and things like that in the interim that exacerbate the encroachment visually of these higher buildings. And so I wanted to understand, you know, the first step in the process.
Great. Okay, well, I hope we've helped start your understanding of that, but it would be a very long-term study should one of the ways or avenues that Mike was mentioning result in this getting on the work plan for the department.
This was just more efficient for me than trying to call up a phone number during a random day and figure all of this out, since I figured I had knowledgeable, as I have determined, knowledgeable people that can help me in that first step.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you too. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or ask a question about this application? I am not seeing anyone with their hand raised. Janeth or Deb, can you confirm that?
That's correct. There are no hands raised.
Okay, great. All right, Mr. Fukuhara, have you had a chance to read through all of the conditions of approval and you understand them and are in agreement?
Yes, I have.
Okay, great. And speaking of the trees, just very briefly, I do see that there's a condition in here that calls for replacement trees. So Mike and Mr. Fukuhara, that's correct, right?
I'll defer to Mike on that. I didn't notice that in the report, but if that's the case, then we're happy to.
Yeah, yes, there is a condition to replace the tree that we're authorizing for removal to be replaced.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we're more than agreeable to that.
Okay, great. Okay, well then, seeing no further public comment, and I don't have any other questions, I want to thank Mike for the staff report and Mr. Fukuhara for your input, and I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and I will issue a written approval this afternoon in accordance with the findings and conditions in the staff report. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 3, and that is owner applicant Eric Wood. There's file number PLN 2020-00311. The location is 573 Menlo Oaks Drive, Menlo Oaks, and the assessor's parcel number is 062140160. And Brian Albini is the project planner. So I'm going to ask Brian to start with a staff report and recommendation.
Hi, good morning, members of the public, zoning hearing officer, and attending staff. The project before is for the legalization of a 98 square foot accessory, detached accessory structure that's located in the front 50% of the subject parcel, where all detached accessory structures would require being in the rear 50% of the parcel. This project is an attempt to seek an approval for those requirements. Apologize, let me advance the project. So again, a little bit of background on the timeline. This parcel was developed over the course of 2018 and 2019 on a non-conforming parcel with 2 non-conforming structures as approved under the previous planning case 2016-00104, and that was to allow for the carport that you see here to be located in the front half of the parcel in order to provide the required 2 covered parking spaces for the single family residents in the rear. The home and the carport were completed in 2019 and finally approved in early 2020. And subsequently, the property owners began construction of a bicycle storage facility adjacent to the existing carport. Upon hearing some complaints from the neighbors about whether this was permitted, the applicants stopped construction and immediately applied for a use permit in order to address the location of the accessory bicycle storage structure and the increase in lot coverage that would be incurred over the 30% allowed in this S100 district. I'll cover that all in the subsequent slides, but I wanted to provide some kind of background and context. This is the subject parcel. The most recent 2018 aerials did not include a snapshot of the completed existing home, but as you can see, the foundation forms have been laid and the white square indicates the approximate location of the proposed carport. I apologize, of the proposed bicycle structure. Again, this is the status of the current structure as it exists now, and its approximate massing as viewed from both the existing residence on the lower image and from Menlo Oaks Drive in the upper image. Again, this is the final rendering of the plans of elevations of the carport as it would be viewed from the street. In later subsequent slides that the applicant has provided, all the materials and colors would match the existing hardy board materials that exist with the house. This diagram identifies the existing nonconformities of the carport but also identifies the area of the 98 square foot bicycle storage building and where it encroaches within that 40-foot required setbacks, so that in keeping in line with the existing carport, it will be 36 feet from the required front property line. Again, the table below, taken from the staff report, shows that the nonconformities that would be expanded with the project are the lot coverage increased by 1%. Currently, what exists on the parcel, or what's been permitted on the parcel, is a 29% lot cover. I'm sorry, 22% lot coverage and 29% floor area. The addition of the covered accessory structure would tip over that maximum floor area allowance to 31%, over the 30% that would ultimately be allowed. And then as far as the nonconformities for the accessory structure, as I mentioned before, all accessory structures that are detached must be placed in the rear 50% of any parcel. And in this case, the project would be placed in the front yard. But by all other requirements for setbacks, height, and area coverage for accessory structures, the 98 square foot bicycle storage building does comply. As far as environmental review, the project is exempt from CEQA for the modification and minor addition of existing structures. My recommendation is that the zoning hearing officer approve of the project based on the findings that were made in the staff report in attachment A. That concludes my presentation on the project. The applicants are in attendance and have also provided some additional slides to give some more context about their project. In addition to that, four members of the public commented on the project and provided some statements in their objection to the project and some comments, and I'll be happy to address those after the applicant has spoke. And also I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I do have several questions, but I will ask for the applicant to make their comments, and then I will ask for the public to make comments, and then I would like to ask some questions and make some comments as well. So we'll start with the applicant. If you would like to make a brief presentation or add some comments.
Great. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. First of all, I wanted to say that when we started this project, we actually didn't realize we needed permitting. I thought I read the zoning and that the accessory structures under 100 square feet didn't need to be permitted. I was informed by my neighbor that because it was in the front half that it did need to be. And so at that time, we actually stopped construction immediately. And then, as Brian mentioned, we applied for proper approval. Let's see. Secondly, we just needed a place to have secure storage for bicycles. Unfortunately, we had a bicycle and a dog trailer stolen earlier or last year. So we definitely need some place to lock that up. And the shape of the property makes it very difficult to bring both a bicycle and a trailer all the way to the backyard. Let's see. So here you can see how that might look. So it's in keeping with the appearance of the house, and you can see a picture of the house there. And then Brian, if you want to go to the next slide. We looked at the neighborhood and to see if there are, existing precedents for this kind of location. And so I just pulled out a few examples, all in the same street and the same block. If you go to the next slide there. So one of the concerns is that it may be, close to the property line. And this is actually, you can see my address in the upper right-hand corner there. 573, and you can see that immediately next to me, there's actually a 0 lot line accessory structure there. So it's something that exists in the neighborhood already. Next slide, please. Here's another example of my across the street neighbor. Her carport or garage is also on or immediately adjacent to the property line with a shared, that's shared with the neighbor. And then in terms of the appearance, I just wanted to show another example here. Here's my another across the street neighbor, which has similar appearance. It's in all white, and it's much closer to the front of their property line than where my proposed building is. So I'm hoping that that will provide some good context to what we hope to achieve. Okay. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I'm hoping with the addition of this building that we'll be able to lock up our bicycles and maybe provide a little bit more privacy. The funny thing was with the construction of this building, so you can see there's an oak tree that's between the carport and the house, and that stopped us from building on the front portion of our property. So we have a very small backyard. And so our sort of play space is in the front, and it's quite open. So we were hoping that putting this bicycle shed there would provide a little bit more privacy for our front yard.
Okay. And does that conclude your comments for the time being? I know we'll have more questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do note that there are 2 people who are in attendance, and this would now, I'm opening the public hearing, this would now be the time to indicate that you would like to speak. And maybe Janet or Deb, you can remind people how they, I do see 1 hand raised. I cannot tell who it is, but maybe
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
so Scott Barron has raised his hand. So Scott, I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to speak. And then also following him would be Ann Cortlander. So let's hear from Mr. Barron first.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barron?
Hi, thanks.
Yeah.
I submitted a written statement, but I can just read it for simplicity. So I'm the neighbor immediately adjacent to the proposed structure, and while I consider the owners really good friends, I must object to the construction of this structure for the following reasons. 1, I think the height and the location of the proposed structure are inconsistent with the look and the feel of the neighborhood, and in my opinion, cause an undesirable view from my property as well as from the street. The intent of having a bike shed for storage on the front half of the property is totally understandable and reasonable, but I believe this could be achieved without placing the structure so close to the street and without making it so tall. Clearly, the zoning regulation which prohibits accessory buildings from existing in the front half of the property exists for a reason, and I assume part of that reason is to keep potentially unattractive sheds from negatively affecting the curb appeal of the street and the neighborhood. The proposed structure is very close to the street and very visible, and I see no reason why the shed couldn't be located further back from the street and reduced in height to minimize its visibility. I believe the zoning regulations prohibit a front yard fence from being higher than 4 feet tall, and this shed has the effect of kind of looking like a 9 or 10 foot tall fence across a good portion of the front yard. Number 3 reason, from the drawing, we can see that it's only 36 feet from the front setback or from this front property line, and I don't see any reason why needing a shed in the front yard would all of a sudden require violating the front setbacks. Number 4, it's also my understanding that accessory buildings count. Well, I guess I already understand this one. I don't also see why the need for a storage shed would allow violation of the floor area square footage. So for those reasons, I propose that I believe the proposed structure in its current form and location should not be allowed. And I think there's other options for a smaller, less tall structure that would not create the negative impact from my perspective on my side of the fence or from the street. And I think those alternative options would be more amenable to myself and the neighborhood. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And I did receive your letter, so thank you for, or email. So thank you for writing that. And I did receive the others as well. But I think now it's Ms. Courtlander.
That's right. I'm going to go ahead and allow Ms. Courtlander to speak. Go ahead.
There. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, perfect. I hear a phone ringing. It's not mine. Oh, there, it's muted now. Okay, fine. So actually, I very much in my comments letter, objection letter, echoed what Scott said in terms of this particular structure. I live around the corner from it, and so I walk by it when I'm walking through the neighborhood. And quite honestly, when it was first appeared, I thought it was some sort of construction shed or something having to do with finishing the electrical work in the garage, in the carport, because of where it was, et cetera. And it never occurred to me that it would be a permanent structure there. It is exactly as Scott described it, very obtrusive. It is out of the, not in keeping with the nature of the neighborhood, and quite frankly, not in alignment with the regulations governing accessory buildings. The photographs that Brian put in his document clearly show that it's a pretty intrusive building, even if you don't look at the specifics associated with where it sits and the size and volume of it. There is room in the back, per the planner, for this structure. And I don't think that it would be that inconvenient to bring bikes around the side of the house to either ride or put in a car or take to the back. So I just don't see why the county would go against its own regulations and allow this structure to remain when it could be very easily taken out and placed in the back. It completely blocks and is the, the yard. It's not in the keeping with Menlo Oaks, which is a very semi-rural area. And the houses that were cited by Eric in his comments, those houses, although some of them have been somewhat redeveloped, they've been here for 40 or 50 years at least. And so it's a very different situation. I think Eric and Danielle did an excellent job when they shoehorned their new house and their new carport into a very narrow lot. They did a terrific job, and I don't think any of us in the neighborhood thought otherwise, in fact, applauded them. But this new structure just isn't in keeping with the neighborhood, and I believe should be removed. And certainly Kay Hitch, whose letter I sent in with mine, believes the same thing. And I think that the other commentator, Judy Horst, also thought the same thing. So that's essentially a précis of our three letters.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does that conclude your comments?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you very much. And yes, I did want to indicate that I received 4 letters in total, from one from Kay Hitch, one from Judy Horst, one from Ann Courtlander, and then also the first one was from Scott Barron. So I do thank you for sending in those letters. So are there any other public comments? I am not seeing any, but let me just double check. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for confirming that, Jana. I did want to ask both Brian and the applicant, you both may want to respond to this, but I do see that this is a very large shed, and even though it's only 98 square feet, but it is In the front yard, it does not appear to me to be in proportion to the size of the parcel on which it's being built. It does seem out of proportion. And so I would like Brian to comment on that, because one of the first findings that need to be made that is that the proposed development is proportioned to the size of the parcel on which it is being built. And I see this as frankly out of proportion with the size and the location upon which it's being proposed. So Brian, could you maybe talk to that? And I'd like the applicant to speak to that as well.
Understood. And the findings on the proportionality were in taking the percentage of the increase of floor area and the height of the structure and its surrounding and the surrounding carport and context on my findings on the proportionality. That the structure was not over height according to zoning, and that the 98 square foot increase was negligible, while the location issues are being addressed as far as distance from the public right-of-way, adjacent properties. I felt that it was proportional a lot, but I'll hand it over to the property owners so that they can elaborate.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, Mr. Wood or Mrs. Wood,
Yeah.
if you'd like to comment. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, Brian, if you have available to you the entire site plan so that you could see the structure in relationship to the entire lot. And that may provide some better context as to the proportionality of it. If not, I have it, if you would allow me to share.
I'm fine if you share that. I don't know if Brian has it or if you've got it, but I would appreciate seeing that.
I have it available. If you have it ready, Eric, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. Okay, so you should be able to see this. So here's the entire lot, and the left side is the property line that I mostly share with Scott Barron. And then you can see the small piece here. Let's see if I can draw it on here. So here we go. Here's the proposed site. And then, with regard to whether or not it's easy to move back to the backyard. And so unfortunately, the way that this works is that you would have to go back here, negotiate. This is a required, oh, I'm sorry, this is a light well. And then this here is a required platform for the utility building or the utility room. So we have to negotiate these really narrow spots here and then go into the backyard. And as you can see, the backyard is quite small. So we're hoping that we can, store something a little bit closer to where we'd use it. And then also to be able to provide a little bit of privacy for our front yard, which is our main place. So I'm not sure what the criteria is for proportionality, but
yeah, and I think the criteria probably is mathematical, as Brian was explaining, and in percentages, but I also think proportionality has to do with visual impact. And even if you can make the mathematics of it or the arithmetic of it work, I have real trouble with that first finding, and actually couple of the other findings as well, that this is somehow visually proportional to the development on the site. I see it as very, very different. It's a very different proportion than what your carport is, which is very visible, or you see through the carport. It's not a solid structure, and I'm assuming that was part of what went into the findings when you got approval for the carport, is that this, which is also sitting in that front area, that it was very visually unobtrusive. You made it very kind of light in feeling. And this proposed building is not of that same kind of visual style. And so I don't think it is proportional to what is its context and to what's around it. The other concern that I have is that the third finding that I have to make, which is C, which is that the proposed development is as nearly in conformance with the zoning regulations as reasonably possible. I'm having trouble with that one too. I don't see this as nearly in conformance. To be as nearly in conformance would be to be somewhere either in the backyard where it is allowed or the rear part of the lot, or somewhere that is perhaps still in the front, but not as upfront or as visually obtrusive as this is.
Right.
And I would have trouble even if it were in another location in the front yard, but if it were smaller and maybe tucked behind the carport, that might be a little more acceptable. But I'm not recommending that, but I'm just saying that I think that third finding is not possible to be made the way it's currently proposed, because it's not as nearly in conformance as is possible. Yeah, so if you could speak to that, Mr. Wood, and maybe Brian wants to speak to that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Brian, would you like to go first, or otherwise I'll use my comments now?
Sure, and the findings on proportionality were a balance of the existing kind of massing on the site, the level of intensity of development, and the proposed use, where the an accessible area to store bicycle and athletic equipment is an acceptable use, and wouldn't offer kind of an extra privilege to the property owners, and the location was really driven by the applicant's construction efforts, and they're seeking to legalize what was there and through the use permit process for the floor area and location requirements.
Thanks. I'd like to add too that first of all, there is a pre-existing accommodation, as you pointed out, Lisa, for the carport. So the finding there was that the lot was narrow enough that it was unreasonable to expect to put the carport in other places, and that the setback to 5 feet was found to be okay because the lot width, which is actually only 40 feet or just under 40 feet, which is half of the minimum lot width. So we asked for the proportion of the setback to be half of what would be the otherwise normal setback. So I was following the same guidelines as that. With regards to the lightness of the carport versus the garage, that actually was a financial consideration. There was not an accommodation for visibility in that approval. So that was not one of the things that was considered. I'll also note that, in the neighborhood, there are things, so because the accessory building is finished in the same manner as the house, there's no visible difference between the accessory building and a house because it's the same material, same height. So I wanted to just point out that for example, the neighbor's house is at about this level, as you can see as my green line, and that can be seen in the photograph that Scott submitted. And then the other photographs, there's many precedents already in the neighborhood where that is the case. So we're actually much further back than those. So I didn't think that was going to be an issue.
Okay, so, and Brian, maybe you can clarify this. My understanding is that the front setback in this neighborhood is actually 40 feet. Is that
40
correct?
feet, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
And that both are seeking um, relief from those constraints as well.
Okay, okay.
Can I, sorry, can I
Yes.
real quick? I do see Danielle Wood has her hand raised. So
Okay.
I want to give her the opportunity to speak.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to say really briefly that another thing that makes this lot, in addition to it being half the normal width, difficult to work with, is that it has heritage oaks on it. And so we set the house as far back as we did, giving ourselves very little room in the back because these circles that you see are heritage oaks. And so, you know, we also used permeable paving because of the heritage oaks, and that is why it's hard to move bikes back and forth. So the amount of space that we're talking about moving those bikes is actually a very far distance, and the width is only a couple feet wide. So with a trailer, it is quite difficult. And so, you know, we're trying to be really respectful of the neighborhood and of the trees. There are just so many issues with the lot that make it difficult. And I think that, you know, the neighbors are seeing a structure that's partially built with no siding on it. It does look very ugly right now because it's raw wood that's been sitting out there for, you know, 8 months while we waited to have this hearing. So I hope that the picture of what it will look like and seeing that it's very in keeping with the house that everyone is saying they love, it will look lighter and airier because it will be white like the house and modern and clean. That really close-up picture of the wood structure was to give you an idea of what was on the site, but it makes it look much larger than I hope it looks when you see it in proportion in the color that it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was another question that I had, because in the pictures that Brian showed, it was a wood framed with some plywood paneling. In the pictures that were shown this morning from Mr. and Mrs. Wood, it looks like there is some sort of a white covering on it. Was additional work done between the time that, Brian, you took your pictures and what it looks like if I were to drive by there today?
Let me take a moment to correct. That is a artistic rendering that the
Oh,
applicants have provided.
Okay, okay. So that's
So
not what is
I'll share that image so that we can get
Okay.
some more context. I apologize. I didn't make that clear in the presentation.
Okay.
So this is Eric and Danielle's artistic rendering of the structure based on the massing that's already on the site. So using the images of what's already been built, they've indicate, you know, through an artist rendering, using the hardy board and mimicking the lines and materials and style of the house to the rear. This is the completed image of the structure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Sure. Thanks. Then another question that I have, if the decision to make the carport a carport instead of a garage was based on financial considerations, which are fair enough, should it be turned into a garage, Brian, would that increase what is considered to be the floor area in the,
No, it wouldn't. So conversely, in this district, the first 400 square feet of parking structure is not applied towards floor area calculation. And so if I recall correctly, the remaining balance of allowable floor area to build, I believe, was about 15 to 30 square feet. I apologize, it's a little bit less. So yeah, if we're considering an enclosure of the carport, would be allowed by zoning and would not have required an additional extension of the lot coverage or over the required floor area.
Okay. So if that carport's to be enclosed just in its current shape, floor area ratio wouldn't change, floor area wouldn't change.
Correct.
Okay.
I will just
Essentially, the
say
use
though that
permit- apologies.
we wouldn't be able to fit 2 cars in and also storage in the current floor plan. So what Eric was talking about was that when the architects initially made us the garage, they suggested putting a storage unit attached to it, but behind. And we thought it would be more in keeping to be able to see through it. And so that's why we put it in line with the current carport when we had more money. We've now been in the house for almost 2 years. We couldn't afford to do it when they originally suggested it with also building the house.
So, yeah, and that was going to be my next question, and it's for both the applicant and Brian. If this storage area were to be relocated behind the carport and either incorporated into the garage or not incorporated into the garage, but just a standalone smaller storage area, that would still need, unless it was less than 30 square feet, it would still need some sort of a non-conforming use permit because we're still talking about increasing the floor area.
And the locational criteria, because of the depth of the lot, even pushing this accessory structure all the way to the front door of the home would still be located within the front 50% of the parcel. So it would still require a use permit, even if it's relocated to another portion of this parcel.
Yeah, okay. In the front.
Correct.
In the front. Okay. Now, the other buildings that were pointed out that have existing garages in the detached structures in the front setback or in the front half of the parcel, those are for the most part garages and carports. Is that correct? They're not storage areas in addition to garages or carports.
No, my understanding was that they're existing legal non-conforming parking structures that predate the adoption of the S100 district.
Okay, yeah, and they are parking structures. They're not, yeah, and they may have some storage associated with them, but they're primarily a parking structure.
That's my understanding.
That are existing legal non-conforming, okay, because they were built before the existing requirements were put in place. Yeah, and I see that as a difference between that and what is being proposed here, because Mr. and Mrs. Woods have a parking structure here. It is legal non-conforming, but they have their parking structure, whether it's a carport or enclosed. And now this is something in addition to that, which is not in a conforming location. And I am still having trouble making those findings that it's merely in conformance with the zoning regulations as is reasonably possible. I think there is a reasonably conforming location, and that's at the back of the house, where these kinds of structures are anticipated being.
Could I introduce one extra point of information? Is the residence itself was built with encroaching setbacks. So the real setback between the fence and the structure is at most 4 feet and at times 2 feet. So while it could be said that you could haul a bicycle into a compliant accessory structure, the reality is that it is very narrow and it wouldn't be used for the use it was intended, and it would benefit being located in an area that would be more accessible up in front of those narrowing setbacks to the backyard.
Yeah, can we take a look at that site plan again? Because I was going to ask you about that setback between the the fence, in which looking at it this direction would be on the left-hand side. I know the light wells were talked about on the other side.
Let's see, bring that up. Is that large enough for you? Can you?
Yeah, I can see it. Thanks. Now as we're looking at this in bird's eye view on this right-hand side, what is that the setback you're talking about that is only 4? No, the other side, sorry. That side, what is that setback? Where your
one
person?
Here?
Yeah.
This one here, I believe, is 5 feet. So it's the same here. Yeah,
Okay.
That is clearly in line. Yeah, maybe actually even, no, I take that back. This is 4 feet. To be clear, though, this is a deck, so it's impassable on this side of the building.
Okay, so do you have steps up to that deck, or what do you have? I see steps there.
These are the steps here, but it's only accessible through this door or by going around the house. And there's another door here, actually. Yeah, so the path to the rear of the property is by the light well, and then again by the landing for the utility room.
Okay, so where are you on the other side, where you have the 4 foot noted now? Is there a fence or something that prevents you from going up and onto the deck at that point?
Yeah, there's a fence that exists right there. So the front and backyard, because we have a dog, is sealed off. So there's a fence right there where I drew the line, and then there's another fence and gate here. So there's no gate on the right side. There is a gate on the left side.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the entire pathway, which is not shown here, is done in the same manner as these. So these are poured in place pads, which of course makes it difficult for our child to ride on.
Okay.
But if you wouldn't mind, could I ask a question to Brian? With the rules around accessory buildings, I thought that the up to 100 square feet accessory buildings were, because they were not permitted, did not count against the floor space maximum. Was I mistaken on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a misconception. So you are correct in a detached accessory structure under 120 square feet, as defined by the California Building Code, would not require a building permit if it was not powered or had utilities running to it. So typically a tough shed, a typical storage structure that we would all understand is sold, prefabricated, would not require a permit. And so I understand that confusion because your proposed structure does not have power to it and does not show a floor area beyond 120 square feet.
120, yeah.
So in that sense, that's why I understood the initial attempt to begin construction. But that does not preclude you from the floor area requirements because it is a completely enclosed structure. It does count towards floor area as a structure. And because of its location criteria, it requires the use permit.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that the house was built with, again, special non-conforming allowances or permits for smaller than ordinary setbacks. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct. In 2017 under PLN 2016-00 104.
Right. And to kind of come back now and say, well, we created this situation, which we needed to do at the time to get a reasonably sized house and to, get our light wells in and, build what we wanted and needed to build at the time. But to use that now as the reason for why you can't put something in a location where it's allowed seems a little, it's a difficult finding for me to make, to say that you created a situation and now because of that self-created situation, you cannot now meet other requirements that would have otherwise been required or needed. it just seems tautological to me. I can't, it's too circular. I can't make that finding that says there's no reasonable location for this shed or this storage area because of things that we did previously. That just is too circular an argument for me to be able to legitimately make a finding that says this is a reasonable location. So I am just not seeing my way clear to make these findings.
Yeah, I see your argument there. I guess the way that we look at it is that we were, because of the lot size or the width needed to, and the location of the trees, there really wasn't a decision to put the house in the place that it was. It was simply the only place it could be put. So so I do feel a little bit painted in the corner there, because you know, had we observed the 10-foot setbacks, we would have had a 20-foot wide house, which, you know, clearly wouldn't be a good habitable space. And yeah, so you know, like I feel very much like we're locked into the current configuration, and that the way that I approached this, or in my thinking, was, look, if these exist as accommodations, then shouldn't the accommodations set a precedent? And that's what I understood the process to be, is that you know, if there are neighborhood precedents, if there are precedents on your own property, then that would be an indication that you are not breaking a norm.
Yeah, and unfortunately, discretionary actions, which which your previous use permit approval was, and by discretionary meaning there's judgment there. It doesn't meet a code specifically or exactly, but there's some discretion allowed. Those do not set precedents. They're not precedent setting. So in essence, if you got approval for a use permit on your site, a non-conforming use permit, doesn't mean your neighbor's going to get approval for a use permit. Doesn't mean you're going to get approval the next time around should you apply for one, which in this case you happen to have applied for one. It doesn't mean that you're going to get approval of that one. So they're very specifically not precedent setting. And so that's the difficulty of a discretionary action. It doesn't mean that once it happens, it will always happen in every situation down the road. I don't know, Brian, if you have anything you want to add to that, but
really was more of a point of clarification from you was, is there a configuration that meets the goals of the applicant to provide some sort of storage that's accessible for bicycle equipment that would in better keeping with whether the structure was rotated, whether it was placed behind the carport, whether vegetation for screening was provided as part of the conditions of approval? What would soften the impacts that are obviously noted in our meeting today, but would achieve the real requirements of the applicant to have some type of security for equipment and prevent future theft?
right. Well, I think there probably were opportunities when the carport / if it had been originally planned as a garage, that there probably were opportunities to include some additional storage area at the back of that structure, which would have been far more in keeping and in proportion, what I would consider proportionality to the width of the lot, than what's currently proposed. So something that is behind that existing now carport, especially if it had been designed in a part of a garage to begin with. at the back.
Mhm.
So in essence, the garage would have been a little bit bigger, or the carport would have been a little bit bigger, but it would have accommodated that storage in a far less intrusive manner. It's where those little paving stones are now. I think there's
Mhm.
4 of them, of the paving stones.
Yeah, do you see my green box?
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Because
And
I think, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Could I ask a question? Would it be worth your time for a continuance of the project if the applicant wanted to entertain any other location possibilities and have you review that new plan? And again, this was just off the top of my head, and the applicants are well within their right to reject the suggestion. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
whether an alternative design would benefit the conversation.
Yeah, I think it would benefit the conversation. I would ask the applicants for their opinion as well, and whether they want a continuance.
Yes,
You
no,
know?
that would be like, we just need a place to put our stuff so that it doesn't get stolen. And it's as simple as that. And it preferably without having to, carry them over steps or things like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anyone else who is do any other people? I think, yeah, Danielle, Mrs. Woods, you have your hand raised.
I don't have my hand raised. I would just say, I think in this entire project, from the building of the house moving forward, we've tried to be incredibly cognizant of the feel of the neighborhood, the health of the trees, which is a huge concern in our neighborhood, the request for permeable path instead of driveway type material from the county. And, we're not trying to do any trickery to get something through, but it's really difficult to haul bikes in such a normal space from all the way in the back. And so, we all want less cars on the road. It's good for kids to bike. We just want a safe place to put the bicycles. And so any help you can give us to try to figure out what would be possible would be very helpful, so that we can achieve that aim.
Right. Well, and the difficulty here is that I can say I can definitely continue this hearing, and I can give you, what my opinion is about what possibilities there are. I cannot guarantee that once that might be drawn up, that it's going to be approved. So I can't say if you move this to the back of your garage or carport, I would approve it. I would have to see a rendering of that or an elevation of that as part of a reconfiguration. So and it would have to go out to your neighbors for their review as well within the 300-foot radius, which is exactly what, Brian did for this. So, neighbors would be notified and they'd have an opportunity to comment again. So I can say, I think it would be beneficial to look at that other location for comparative purposes, and then we can go forward from there. But I cannot guarantee that that's what I would approve. So I just need to warn you of the risks involved should you decide to continue and look at other locations.
Well, I guess the last question is the height, because the height has been brought up a number of times, but the height is in keeping with what we read the requirements to be, and it's actually shorter than the current carport. So if we were to attach it to the carport, it would actually be the height it is now or higher than it is right now. So to make the visual in line with the carport. So I guess I have a question about that as well.
Right. Yeah, so because you would not want something to jog down from the existing carport structure, is what I'm hearing you say, that it's a cleaner line if it comes across at the same height as the
Yeah, we want
carport.
to make it look contiguous. Yeah.
Yeah, like it belongs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brian, how does that height, I'm assuming the carport meets height requirements for
For the
detached.
district,
Yeah.
it does.
Okay.
It does.
And so if a storage area were added to the back, it would meet height requirements.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think that's the answer technically, is that yes, it would meet height requirements. Now it certainly would still change the look in the front. There would be from the street, from the front of your house, you would still have what looks to be much more like an enclosed garage, whether you add this onto your carport or whether you still make it a detached structure, but just sitting behind the carport. It's still going to close off the view from the street to your house. It will give you that privacy in essence that I think is part of what you're seeking with this, the way it's proposed. I thought I heard you say that it affords you some
Indeed.
privacy.
Yeah. Because we can also put in a fence. So I think we were allowed to put in a 6-foot fence because if I'm not mistaken. So in order to do that, we would probably just put a fence there.
So
Right.
really quick, I wanted, because the issues of fencing were brought up in comment, I want to make clear, so the fence height requirements dictate that 4 feet are on the front yard setback area for the property, and from that essentially 40 feet back on the other property lines is when you can begin the 6-foot fence.
Oh, I thought it was.
So I wanted,
20 feet. That's what I guess I'm mistaken, because you can see my drawing here that I was thinking that it was a 20-foot setback.
No, and that's what needs to be clear is that the S100 district and the specifically on Menlo Oaks. So Menlo Oaks has a 40-foot, Menlo Oaks Drive has a 40-foot front yard setback. And so the 6-foot fence would be allowed in that front yard setbacks with the fence height exception. And that's a separate procedure to allow a 6-foot fence maximum, which would be 2 feet above the 4-foot allowance.
I see. So we'd have to put it in at the 40-foot mark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. So either at the beginning of the carport or I apologize, at where you've indicated on your site plan, at the 40-foot from the closest point on that angled front property line.
Yeah, from this corner here. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then that would essentially create the privacy either with a mix of fencing or landscaping. I think you could achieve the privacy and the screening that you're looking for.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, again, we're back to looking at a continuance if that is amenable to the applicants. But I do need to caution that if you bring in a drawing that shows an alternative location, it isn't a guarantee that it's going to be approved. It's just that it is an option that we will then review.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there particular criteria that you feel like would be an immediate disqualification so that we don't bother, going down that route and wasting everyone's time?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the turning of the structure just on its, so the 7-foot dimension, second green box would not be acceptable. I think that is still not proportional to the width of the lot, that it would have the same kind of impact, not as dramatic, but the same kind of impact as the current proposal has.
Got it. Okay, that's good advice. Yeah, no, I actually, the next location that I think would be nice looking and things like that would probably be this one here, would be my preference. And if there's nothing that you could think of right now that would immediately disqualify us on that, then I would go ahead and put a proposal on that side.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
build that out.
Okay. By build it out, you mean do some sort of a rough sketch of it. Don't
Indeed.
actually build anything.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I understood.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's part of how we're where we are now. Yeah, okay, great. Okay. So you would drop a sketch. It could be re-advertised, or we can continue it to a date certain if we want, and that would mean there is no re-advertising of the next meeting, but it would mean that neighbors would have to understand that a different proposal is coming in and would be evaluated. So I would think we'd want to send out some sort of a courtesy notice, Brian.
I would be more than welcome to distribute copies of the revised site plan and design and architectural rendering to all the interested parties that commented today.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, so does that sound like at least a way forward here?
Yeah.
Yes, if we could set a date, because it took so long to get this date. We actually started in May of last year before realizing that we had read it incorrectly and stopped construction immediately when we knew that. So it's taken a long time to get a date, and it would be great to know that we were on the calendar for a future date.
Okay, let's look at some dates. I've got my calendar hanging on the wall here. There is the 18th. That might be a little soon, but, and that's of this month of February. There is also March 4th.
Yeah, March 4th sounds great if there's time on the docket.
Okay, I'm going to ask Deb real quick, Deb Robinson, does it look like March 4th is available? Oh, you're muted, Deb.
Sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
March 4th is fine. February 18th is too late for February 18th anyway, but March 4th works.
Okay, March 4th works. And Brian, does that work in your schedule?
Yes, that'll be fine.
Okay, and that works for the applicants. All right, and then I am going to ask if the neighbors who are on the line here, if they understand the process here, the continuance, and that an alternate proposal is going to come forward.
Yeah, and what would be our method of applying or responding to that?
Okay, I'm going to ask Brian, when an alternative location and proposal comes in, you had indicated you'd be notifying the people who spoke today as well as wrote letters.
Correct.
Commented.
So I have Judy Horse and Cortlander, Kay Hitch, and Scott Barron that provided comments, and I would be redistributing the revised plans to them directly.
Sorry, can I interrupt really quickly? I do see, I don't know if it's too late in the meeting, but Ann Cortlander has her hand raised again. So
yes.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah. Yes. Please unmute her. Yeah.
Go ahead and unmute your mic and begin speaking. Ms. Cortlander?
Hi. Well, I was going to ask what Scott asked in terms of process, but the other part of the process is how long is that, whether you call it a construction box or a large pod storage unit, how long is that going to remain where it is?
It's most likely going to remain where it is in its current configuration until this is resolved. It's stop work, and I'll ask Brian to confirm this, but I'm assuming a stop work notice was put on it from either the building division or planning has indicated.
No, the applicants were very proactive when they were made aware of the need for a permit. And so as soon as their neighbor made them aware of it, they immediately applied. And so there's no record of a stop work notice or a violation from code enforcement.
Okay, so then I think the answer is that it will stay in its existing condition until this is resolved. And I do want to go over that fuller process so everybody understands. When Mr. and Mrs. Woods bring in a revised location and a sketch of what that would look like, Brian distributes it. We'd come back to a hearing like this on, we decided March 4th. And then whatever decision I make, that is appealable to the Planning Commission. So if someone is dissatisfied with the decision for any reason, you make a written appeal by a certain date. There's a 10 working day appeal period. It would then be scheduled in front of the Planning Commission for their consideration. They can overturn my decision, whatever decision I make, they can overturn it and make a different decision, or they could uphold it and say, yes, that was the right decision. Whichever decision they make, that can then again be appealed to the Board of Supervisors, and it would be scheduled in front of a board hearing. We try to get to a point where, you know, it doesn't have to get elevated to the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors, that we can work something out amongst the property owner, the applicant, and neighbors that is satisfactory to everyone, so that it doesn't have to go to the Planning Commission and the board. But sometimes these things do, because people disagree, and they either disagree with each other, or they disagree with my decision, or they disagree with the Planning Commission. And so these things can end up sometimes at the Board of Supervisors. So, but that's kind of the longer term process. And in the meantime, while all of that is happening, the structure stays right where it is in its current condition. Okay. So hopefully that kind of clarifies things a little bit.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks for that update. The one other question I had, in terms of the inconvenience of placing the accessory building in the back. If you walk around our neighborhood, there are many flag lot driveways, and often the buildings, the residences in the front have gates into the flag lot driveway, which aids them in their gardeners or moving stuff back and forth from the backyard to the front yard. So I would just suggest that you look at all alternatives before fixing on one alternative to solve this problem. Thanks.
Okay, so, yeah, thank you. So you might be indicating what, that they put a gate on their driveway? Is that?
Well, there seems to be an issue associated with walking a bike from the backyard to the front yard. You know, who am I to say whether that's a real issue or not? I can't decide. But since the regulation states that the accessory building should be in the backyard, what I've noticed in if you walk around our neighborhood, which has a lot of flag lots, is that the person in front on the street will often have gates into the flag driveway to aid in some way with, getting into their backyard. So if you want to ride your bike from your backyard, one thing to do is to have a gate from where the bikes are stored. I'm not designing anything. I'm merely suggesting there are already solutions in place for the fact that accessory buildings are required in the backyard.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I appreciate those comments. I'm not seeing the relationship between a gate on a flag lot. I see, on the pole of what we call it, a pole of the flag lot, those are usually 20 feet wide in width. They're not always paved 20 feet, but they're paved 16 to 18 feet of that 20 feet. And so there's ample room to get a bike or a car or any other type of equipment back there. I think the concern of the applicants is that their side yards are so narrow that they can't get something through there.
Lisa,
So,
if I could offer a bit of a clarification for Ann, I think Ann's suggestion is to utilize the access pole on a neighboring parcel in order to access a gate to their rear yard. So essentially creating some kind of access easement arrangement with a neighbor so that they could ride their bike on the neighbor's easement, go to a gate along that neighboring side yard fence, and then access the rear yard. Is that essentially what you were alluding to, Ann?
Yeah. Yes, I was suggesting that because all I'm suggesting is there are probably a number of different solutions to this that might be acceptable to all parties. I just didn't want to leave out the fact that because everyone seemed to be going towards putting something in the front yard, and all I'm suggesting is that there's still the legal, I'll call it, requirement about the accessory building being in the backyard. And it appears that many people in our neighborhood have opted to have gates into those flag lot driveways. And thank you for clarifying that, Brian.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I see. Well, and we can talk a little bit about this. I don't know how much information the Woods may have about their neighbors immediately adjacent easement or pole to their flag lot, their access way. Is there a way that you can work with your neighbors to get a gate from your yard to their pole, their access, their driveway, let's just call it a driveway, to access your rear yard?
Certainly we haven't talked to them about that, but I would just point out that while that may be a possibility, we'd still probably want to put a fence to make the front yard private. So in terms of visibility, it probably would make no difference. It would make a difference, of course, where you put the bicycles, but in terms of visibility, it wouldn't make a difference. Visibility into the yard, yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you're indicating, I think, Mr. Woods, that maybe you're going to have that fence, 6-foot high fence at your 40-foot setback line for some portion or perhaps the entire width of your property. Is that kind of where you're thinking?
Yeah, that would be the goal. Yeah, to just have private front yard.
Mr. Wood, did you want to include that as part of your resubmittal to me, and we can fold in that consideration in the design?
Yeah, possibly. I guess I just need to sit down and figure out, like, well, is it partial privacy? Is it full privacy? Once we sort of work through the design of the alternative.
Understood.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think we have a plan, and we will come back on March 4th and discuss it. And Mr. and Mrs. Woods will be sketching up at least an alternative location. And if there are other thoughts or ideas that you have, please feel free to bring those forward as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be the one that we talked about today.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I know this is a difficult conversation sometimes, so I appreciate everyone contributing and doing the best that we can. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll see you on March 4th. All right.
Okay,
take care.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to close the public hearing, and the public hearing for today, the zoning hearing officer meeting, is concluded. So thanks, everyone.
Lisa?
Yes.
I will go